After a 10-game weekend, we have crowned our finalists for the Worlds 2021 World Championship. Don Juan Kiem, EDG. I'm joined here by Azael and Vedius for Worlds Cooldown and to close out our semi-final weekend. Grueling 5-game series following another 5-game series. But it is the LPL 1 seed that comes out on top. And so we do have that cross-regional final that I think many were hoping for.
So it was 2017 was the last time we saw an all-Korean final. But ever since then, it has been an LPL representative in the final every single year. Last year, it was Suning that fell short to Damwon. But coming into this tournament, many expected EDG to be one of the front runners. I think that it should come as no surprise that EDG is in the final, but the way in which they've gotten here, I think is a surprise to me.
Exactly. I agree so much with how you're phrasing that at the end, because it's, if you told me before the tournament started, #1 seed from the LPL is going to play the #1 seed from the LCK, it's like, well, duh.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But at the same time, when you watch it, it's weird to think that the LPL, who most people were considering as the stronger region coming in, their #1 seed is in the finals, and people are like, holy crap, are you a huge underdog or what?
I mean, that to me is the wild thing right there. The idea that people will still look at Damwon, who was just pushed to 5 games, as a big favorite over EDG, who as well was pushed to 5 games. But I think in essence, it's because of who pushed them to those points, right?
Yes.
You look at the matchups and you go, well, T1, that makes sense. Gen G surprising so many today by putting up the fight that they did and being within a game's reach of a finals berth of their own.
I think that what we saw from Gen G is what we often saw from Gen G. A very incredible performance from their mid-jungle duo, but I also think that this team lived and died by the success of their mid-jungle duo. And in the final 2 games, it was EDG successfully shutting down BDD. Scout getting those resources early was something that we actually haven't really seen much of this tournament, but when they were able to finally get Scout off the board and actually get themselves through that early game, we really started to see the gap between these 2 teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about EDG being the more complete team, and it did kind of shine through, I think, in the end when Scout was finally able to neutralize. I think, ironically, a big part of shutting down BDD was actually removing the Lee Sin from FLICKR, because how they play as that duo was so incredible. And I just feel like the priority on Lee Sin has skyrocketed through every single series to the point where coming into finals, it has got to be such a high prio pick. You know, for Canyon, you're looking at that. I don't think you can give it to him if you can't give it to Clit either.
But that's the thing, though, because it's so strange that, yes, while it was huge priority in both series, it was EDG who didn't really want to play it, right? Yeah, like, their solution was just get rid of it as an option. And that's almost a terrifying thing for me when I think about EDG looking towards the finals, is that eats one of your bans. Because you know Canyon's taking that in first rotation, or at least following the first set of bans every single time. And so you're going to have to use one of your first 3 if you're not willing to play it yourself.
So, do you want to talk about the finals now or a little bit later?
No, I just wanted to say that thing because we were on the Lee Sin point.
Okay, then
I do want to talk about the finals.
Because I kind of want to talk about the finals.
Well, I'm driving the show.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Driver.
Kids screaming in the backseat.
I will turn this analyst desk around. Okay, so what I do want to talk about before we get to the finals is kind of what you mentioned, what seemed like that pivotal turning point in this series. And while some of it did have to do with removing the Lee Sin and therefore, in essence, nerfing BDD, the mid laners for me. And it was about the uptick in Scout's performance in those last couple of wins. But I do also want to give a nod to BDD as he leaves this tournament, because my God, what a mid lane performance this guy put on all tournament long. You're taking a look at stats for both these players in their wins in this series, and I think it just exemplifies how critical they were to the victories.
Absolutely. I mean, I think BDD should be so proud. I think his body of work across this tournament is the best section of, I guess, 14-odd games that he played that he's ever had in his career. Like, he was incredible throughout Worlds, and I think a lot of people's opinion of him will have skyrocketed after this. You know, most people were talking about him, he's kind of like middle of the pack in LCK, you know, he's not as consistent as the top dogs, but he really did put that to rest, at least for Worlds, because his consistency was incredible.
And what I'll say is that last year, it was a rough road for Gen G, right? Getting smashed by G2 3-0. And also, like, in recent history, Gen G hasn't had the most impressive results internationally. But the fact that a player like BDD, and obviously he wasn't alone, but I think it's fair to say that he kind of hard carried this roster to a World semi-final. And regardless of what you think of the quality of League and the teams representing at Worlds, that is no easy feat, like, at all. And the few players that have done it, FLICKR is one of them. And you kind of look at Showmaker as being the other, right?
Yeah.
And like, these are the mid laners that BDD is consistently competing against on a regular basis. And yeah, okay, domestically, maybe he does fall short, but the reality is that he should be considered one of the best that we have competing right now. And I'm just hoping that he can continue that level of performance moving into 2022.
That's a pair of names I wouldn't be mind,
Right?
wouldn't really mind being grouped into, right? FLICKR and Showmaker. And yeah, again, I'll just remind everyone, as you go all the way back to the group stages where this team was actually in a position to maybe not even make the quarterfinal. And time again, it was BDD.
Four-way tiebreaker.
Exactly. It was BDD who had to come up with some pretty stellar individual performances just to get them to that quarter.
Those sleeps
and then
will haunt me. Those bubbles.
Yeah, exactly. It was brutal. Absolutely
Wake up
brutal.
in cold sweat. Not again!
But that's where, Medius, as you mentioned, that like, hey, there's that pair of incredible mid laners that sat on the other side of the bracket, and then we just build up, you know, kind of the monolith that is BDD on his team. I return to Scout, the player that will actually move on to the World Final to challenge Showmaker in that regard. It's going to take another Herculean performance out of him to do something similar to Showmaker than what he did to BDD today.
I will say one thing, you know, and people are really down on Doumbé. I think he played poorly at Worlds, but he was incredible in the LPL, and Scout was such a huge part of them actually winning that LPL finals. Because coming into that was the story, is that, well, congrats FPX, like no one can stop Doumbé because he had been on such a rampage. He had just been running over teams, and EDG was able to actually craft a plan to shut him down. And it was largely due to some pretty incredible play, I think, from Scout. So it'll be interesting to see what their planning is actually going to bring them. I think that they have to significantly level up if they actually want to be able to challenge Damwon. You cannot turn in sloppy games like you did against Gen G, because Damwon will kill you when you make a mistake. So it's going to take something special, but I think there's some evidence to say that they could really with some preparation.
Yeah, and so final words from me from Scout is very much as you said. I'm really happy we got to see.
I like that you decided this is final words.
Well, they're my final words.
Okay.
You may choose to ask me another question, but I will decline
you can do
to
about a dash.
answer.
You think you're in control.
Anything else on
You're
Scout?
not in control.
Zip.
But I think that Scout, I'm just really happy that we got to see what he is capable of today.
Yeah.
We talked about it at the beginning of the day.
Yeah.
We know that he does have that potential if you just give him a couple of resources. What was that? 32 KDA in wins. Like, the man is just, when you give him an inch, he takes a mile. And I think that just goes to show the caliber that Scout is capable of. And I know that for many LPL fans, they've been waiting for this for so long because Scout is a mid laner that has been hyped for so long for EDG. So it's cool to see that he will make his first finals, and he had a good performance in the semifinals leading into that finals.
All right, I will allow you those final words on Scout, but now I will pull in another player that the casters were talking about, and Lyric specifically. With this win, he wanted to call out the jungler. And if we look towards, you know, Damwon KIA, JJ alongside Scout, again, another big question mark going up against the LCK1 seed.
It was 5 Jarvan games. It was it was a lot of Jarvan is what we saw from him. And obviously his performances was up and down, but I think that he's taken a responsibility on this team that usually would be shared with Mako in terms of being that engaged. And you know, we were talking a little bit about it and how like the meta right now could very well be something that EDG is still finding a way to find reliable success with, given that you don't have Mako being on a lot of those playmakers, being able to facilitate.
Go back to it in that 5th game too, when everything was on the line. But you're 100% right. The majority of the series was predicated on everything else.
Exactly, and I think that JJ taking that responsibility, he did do a good job. And so I think that if he can still continue to work with Scout, obviously taking down Canyon is not an easy feat. No one has done it yet, aside from RNG at MSI earlier this year. But when it comes to best of 5s, that man feels like that he can't be put down. But I will say, don't give him Lee Sin, okay? Just don't. That is not allowed, because I promise you that if anyone's getting a skin, it's him, and it's on Lee Sin.
Good point. I mean, is that the only answer, or what else we got?
Oh, I mean, in that specific matchup, I think.
Yeah, I mean, or whether or not you pull in the duos again, right? If it's not just jungle to jungle.
I think it's absolutely about the duos and how they interact, right? And I think that we've seen that all across Worlds. People talking a lot about how much top lane matters to this tournament, but to me, top lane is unlocked by playing through mid often first. You know, it's about being able to get prio, being able to play with your jungle 2v2, have pushing lanes, move around the map. So many of the top teams have just taken over games, you know, through this map movement, through really good coordinated play. And to me, it's going to be a lot about that, right? And it is a team job to shut down Canyon. You have to be warding. If you got eyes on one side of the map, you have to be invading on the other side of the map and actually dropping wards so you can continually track him, because he is so ridiculously good. It is going to be so hard to stop him. And I think one of the most difficult parts when crafting a plan against Damwon is where is the weakness, right? Like where is the thing that you're supposed to point to? Because as much as you could say, okay, well, Mako should go back to comfort, he should play engage, you know, put JJ maybe back more on Lee Sin as like a follow-up engage or something like that, well, then Damwon might just play Enchanter's bot and just blow you apart from that. Because even in their series against SKT, we saw some really impressive performances from Ghost, who people were expecting to get blown out by Gumayusi and KIA, because most people were pointing to them as the best bot lane in the tournament based on, you know, pros kind of feedback from scrims.
All right, you know, I know you have something you want to jump in with, but as Vedius
it was
is
his
out
final
of
word. He's done
well,
talking.
I know that's the thing. Vedius is out of words for Scout, but I tell you what, that's all right because we're going to hear from the man himself. Shox is standing by with Scout over in Iceland.
Thank you very much. I'm here with Scout after that epic best of 5. And of course, the first question has to be, Scout, what was the key to taking down Gen G in this 5th game?
那首先恭喜你们获得本场比赛的胜利。第一个问题也是想问一下 Scout 选手，你觉得能在第5局最后最终击败 GNG 最大的一个原因或者是重点会是什么呢？
首先我觉得 GNG 的话 ，BDD 是对于他们来说很重要的一个选手吧。然后我们只要中野有主动权的话，其实这个比赛就会比较简单吧。
So I really feel for GNG, BDD is the core member from this team. So if we can have a very good mid-jungle synergy to try to take the initiative in the actual game, we can easily get the win.
And the win you got now, Scout, you have given so much to this organization over the years. There have been so many heartbreaks at Worlds, but now EDG finally makes it to their first World Championship final. How do you reflect on the journey you've had with this team so far and how much it means to make it here?
那接下来这个问题想问一下 Scout 选手的是，其实你也和 EDG 在一起很久了嘛？你们也曾经在以前的全球总决赛之中有过心碎的瞬间，但是这一次你们做到了，你们踏入了最后的决赛舞台。所以说，能问一下你怎么样去看待这一路走来的一个过程呢？同时，你觉得进入到了决赛对你来讲意味着什么？
之前的话，我自己个人来说经验也比较少，然后一直以来成长之后，现在的话就今年的话，我的 经验也挺足的，然后我们的队友也挺给力的，所以我们能走到这一步吧。
So I really feel previously I'm kind of lack of experience on stage. So that's the reason for us didn't manage to have a very good result. But for this year, I think I really grew a lot and I have accumulated a couple of experience in the international stages. And also I have so many good teammates. So with them, we were able to just get into the grand final.
Alongside the great teammates, there are also so many EDG fans worldwide, and their faith has finally been rewarded in EDG. Is there anything you would like to say to the worldwide EDG fans?
那同时呢，你们也有很多一直支持着你们来自全世界的 EDG 的粉丝，所以说有没有什么话想要对所有一直支持着你们的人们说的呢？
Thank you guys for cheering us.
Awesome. Final question. Now up is the big final next week versus Damwon KIA. You are going into this as underdogs. I think that is fair to say. What will it take for EDG to beat Damwon KIA next week?
那在接下来，在下一周，你们也会在决赛舞台和Damwon KIA 碰面嘛？那面对 DK 的话，就是你们可能也是一路冲上来的一个队伍嘛。然后所以说，想问一下，你觉得对于你们来讲是做到什么，然后可以让你们来在决赛的舞台中也能战胜对手呢？
对战 DK 的话，我们的中上也会比较重要吧。然后前面的主动权也会比较重要吧。
So I really feel facing Damwon KIA, our top mid jungle synergies, or the upper half of the map can be very crucial, and also the early game tempo can be a very important part for the grand final.
Okay, thank you very much, Scout and Wendy as well. Back over to you.
Thank you very much, Shox. On Saturday, November 6th, EDG will face off against Damwon KIA for the Summoners Cup. And we heard from Scout himself that he's putting a focus not only on the mid-jungle, but pulling top into that equation as well when it comes to what he thinks might be the difference maker between, you know, success or not in terms of taking down the defending world champion.
So it's really interesting that he says that, because my focus was immediately going to go to bot. Because the thing that we saw consistently today was Viper and Mako getting a lot of 2v2 kills.
Yep.
And when I think about some of the struggles that we saw from Damwon against T1, I actually think it was that bot lane. When he didn't get his hands on Jhin or Ziggs, Ghost was put in a very difficult position by Gumayusi and KIA. And I think that given how aggressive Viper and Mako have shown to be in today's series, this is an avenue with which they can very much look to try and leverage, because multiple times T1 tried to attack Khan. He was 0-2, 0-3, 0-4, yet he always found a way to have impact. So can you say the same thing if you try and shut down that bot lane for Damwon?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think I'd push back a little bit because I do think his Draven game was actually pretty good too. Like, I don't think it was as effective in the later stages. But then if you're giving him the Draven game, you're giving him 4 out of 5 good games against the bot lane that people were saying was the toughest bot lane to play against in the tournament, right? So like as much as like I agree with you that it's probably the weakest point on the map for them, it's still like I actually think that they're playing pretty well. I think that they're playing pretty well throughout this event, and I think that they're not as exploitable as they were at MSI. I feel like they really leveled up in summer. I think that they've played pretty well here in the bot lane at Worlds. Doesn't mean that you're not right, that they shouldn't try to go there anyway, but it's just I still think it's so difficult to actually, you know, be able to pin down how they need to play it. And I think at the end of the day, like it almost sounds like a cop-out, but you just have to play like at or above your highest level that you've played at before, because Damwon just looks to be a better team. When you watch these two series, I do think that mechanically, I think that as far as setup on round objectives, as far as actually how they're playing the map and playing side lanes, Damwon just looked way better, I think, than what EDG showed us today. So you have to play a better game. You have to be able to, you know, perform in the early game especially, because I think if there's anywhere that Damwon is like weak for being the best team in the world standards, it's the early game. Because T1 was able to, especially when you look back to the finals, get significant early leads. Damwon falls behind sometimes, and you often need that buffer to have a chance against them in the mid and the late game because they're so good there.
And overall, neither of these teams are weak. They're the two best teams remaining
incredible
in the world, right? But I do think the point stands that, and as we actually have been talking about over the last couple days, you know, every time we start honing in towards the eventual champion, we begin to rehash those discussions of what makes a champion and what are the most integral things to success at a world championship. And one of the things that I believe have all three come to a conclusion about is that it is no one singular thing, right? It is the amalgamation of multiple things. It is about, you know, peaking at the right moment, both in your play and your strategy. It is, you know, your ability to draft and your understanding of the strengths and weaknesses, not only of the champions and the meta that you are afforded and handed, but also of what your players are capable of doing. Gen G, in a number of ways, was an example of that today, although they didn't get the win. Sticking to their guns and their style is what allowed them to even get to the 5-game series.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there are teams that will pop up from time to time and they look really good on an international level because the meta happens to suit the style that they can play to the best of their ability. Why I am so impressed by teams like T1, you know, in the past when they had these long streaks of dominance, and now Damwon today, is that they feel meta-proof. They can play it all. They can play different styles. They can adapt, right? And that is not a skill that a lot of teams have. It's one of the most consistent things you'll hear from pros after they fall out of Worlds. Well, the meta didn't really suit us, or oh, it's not really our style, right? A lot of the summer split style was roaming supports, you know, very heavily playing engaged supports. There wasn't really any enchanters. The meta changed significantly coming into Worlds, but Damwon looks just as good, if not better, which I just find incredible.
So I definitely think that Damwon is quite a flexible team, but in my opinion, what ultimately makes them the best is their ability to team fight. It's unbelievable how good they are at team fighting. Like in their setups, in their approach, in their patience, like that is why, like, often we've all got teams domestically that you're just like, oh, they're 10K gold down, you know, like, there's a way, they've done it before, you know, right? Like, for Europe, it was the Mad Lions, right? We talked about them. And then when Mad Lions had a 10K gold lead against Damwon, it was Damwon's team fighting that managed to turn the game around for them. And it's just the way in which they approach fights, to me, is what separates them from everyone else in the world. It feels to me like no one can compete for them in the 5v5. You just have to give them a small opportunity and they'll crush you every time.
I agree so much. I mean, Game 5 to me against T1 was just such a masterclass in how to actually play around their win conditions as well. Like, it's not even that they just always draft the same style and team fight that one way. It's like, you look at Game 5, T1 had Gumayusi on his like unbeatable Aphelios. They have a late game Azir, and they just made it look completely worthless because they played around the lack of engage that T1 had drafted for. T1 drafted comfort, T1 drafted, you know, scaling, and Damwon's just like, well, guess what? You're never going to get in range of us. We're never going to miss position. We're going to play the angles perfectly, play the vision and the setup to Vetti's point perfectly. So T1 could never even enter the Dragon area in that 5th game. They ended up having to just flip at Baron because they're like, well, we're never going to be able to fight them. They're never going to let us use our scaling.
Right, and I like the fact that you call out T1 comfort picks in that situation because of how well Damwon played it, almost made T1 look uncomfortable, right? We talked multiple times about, ooh, are they shy on pulling the trigger because they don't know if it's the perfect angle. They can't find the perfect angle, and so they keep backing off of those opportunities to fight until they ultimately get backed into a corner and have to take a stab at something. And that is, again, the team that has pushed Damwon the furthest so far at Worlds. In fact, the only team to take a game off them. The question is, can EDG do the same, and can they do it once more?
And ultimately, what I will say is, based on how we've been speaking, it's pretty obvious that everyone has a consensus that
EDG will win the
that Damwon are the heavy favorites going into this final. And I've seen many people tweeting about like 3-0, easy for Damwon, like T1 was the toughest opponent for them. And like, I understand where that sentiment comes from, and I get it. The caveat for me is that I do not think Damwon have always had the best drafts. Like we talked so much about Jin yesterday that like I still have my doubts around Ghost and what he is super comfortable on and how you can make him uncomfortable as a player. I also think that while Damwon are creative in ways in which using even weaker drafts and still finding success with it, that's because of the caliber of the players. That doesn't necessarily mean that they always draft themselves for success. And I think that while I am expecting Damwon to win, and while I think Damwon should still be considered heavy favorites, I believe that EDG still have the caliber of players and the tools in order to actually create some chaos and maybe even create the upset.
Final word.
I was gonna give you one shot at the close of that, but you beat me to it, man. All right, well, everybody, this does conclude the semifinals. We will be back on November 6th for a 1-hour special edition of Worlds Countdown at noon Central European Time, 4 a.m. Pacific. Set your alarms. Wake up early prior to the 2021 World Finals. As we leave you, though, let's take a look back at our favorite moments from the semifinals with our Axe Effect highlights. Stay healthy, stay safe, and be good to each other. Good night.
Good night.
Told you I'd be a great host.
No more words. No more.
Welcome back to Worlds 2021, taking place in Reykjavik, Iceland. T1 and Damwon KIA fight for a shot at another title.
Damwon KIA, they're going in. Gumayusi going down. Kana forced to back away, carrying it. FLICKR just getting torn apart. It's all too easy for Damwon KIA. Early game close and contested, but mid to late, Damwon KIA in absolute control here in game one. Keep your eyes on that one. They find the reset. That's going to be one. Frozen Thralls now coming out. Damwon KIA getting routed in the Red River Canyon. Still standing strong for a moment. No. Double, triple for Gumayusi. Follow-up kill. A smite steal from Owner. The rookies on T1 are making their mark at Worlds.
An incredible punch back here from T1.
It is fight or die in the final moments, and Showmaker finds KIA. FLICKR getting burned down. But Kana, can he turn it back? Kana, can he make it happen? It is not enough. Damwon KIA will not be stopped. They have the Elder Dragon, they have a wave, they have everything they need to go to the World Finals.
Today, Gen G and EDG fight for the right to challenge them for the world title.
Being zoned away, Rascal going for the pushback. Viper getting kicked. Viper flashes and stays alive. Health bar is low. Will be able to dash across the wall. Lee Sin drops, and Viper this time around saved his summon spells for the right time. This is how you do it. He's gonna miss his first engage. Cliff finds the kick, and they're gonna find that first kill. Gets the smite, no problem. 5v4, Gen G came to play. Gen G came to conquer. But EDG have to run for their lives. Flandre the attack, Flandre the target, and Flandre to die. Gen G may lose the soul, but they win the fight.
2-2 now stands the series score. It all comes down to a best of one to find out who will challenge Damwon KIA in the world final.
Will they kill Mako? Yes, a 1-0. The shots come across. Ruler a bit isolated, but will not be hit by the skill shots. Rascal a blit low, and life has been traded back. The dunk comes in. It's 3 unanswered. A stopwatch for Scout, and he stays alive. It's the ace. It's Gen G falling. And EDG are headed to their first world final.
It all leads to this. Make or break.
Vitality will take them!
A new era is awaiting.